Well, welcome again, guys, to another segment of Empowering Moments with yours truly, Frankie Bell. Again, I would love to say I'm honored that you allow me to come in your homes yet again to share with you phenomenal people that we've met just going around the globe. And today, I will not disappoint you. I have two of the most wonderful people that you ever want to meet, and I am sure at the end of this story, you're going to feel the same way. Today we bring to you my good friends who I've just met, but they're so sweet. I feel like I know them. I feel like we should be eating apple pie or something. I have with me Mr. Bill Turner and his beautiful wife, Donna. We are so honored to have you here on our show. You have such an amazing story of survival, love, and boyfriend-girlfriend type stuff. So I can't wait for us to share it. So we just say welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I met you, Mr. and Mrs. Turner, at my church, and you were talking to us, and I was not expecting you. So, you know, we hadn't been prepped that we were going to have a speaker that day at the end of our pastor. And when you got up, you just shared with us such a phenomenal story about your wife and what she had gone through. And it just touched me so that I told my husband, I said, I got to talk to them before they leave, because I do understand that your story is what I'll call a love story. And so I'm excited for the viewers to hear it. So tell me a little bit about you and Miss Donna, Mr. Bill. What do you want us to know about the two of you?
Well, we've been married 51 years, August the 29th of this year, going on 52. Donna and I met here at Auburn University in
War Eagle.
At War Eagle, 1969. Actually, kind of on a blind date.
Right.
And 4 months later, I asked her to marry me.
Wow.
So it was kind of love at first sight, particularly for me. 'Cause I knew,
Probably her too, if she had said yes.
So, you know, we got married less than a year after we had met, and it's lasted this long. So something was, it must have took anyway.
It was
right?
something, yeah. But just it's 51 years.
That was our first miracle.
That was your
that
first,
we met.
That you met. And so we're going to talk about those miracles throughout this story. And so 51 years, married. How many kids?
We have 2 children and we have 4 grandchildren. We have 2 boys and 2 girls as far as our grandkids. And we have a boy and a girl on our kids. So
well, y'all
we kind of evened it up.
Yeah, good. So you have this wonderful 51 years. Life is good. Y'all are doing great things. You loving on each other. Y'all lived in the Dadeville area in the beginning. Is that true, or?
Well, we're both from Alabama.
Right.
When we married in 70, after I graduated,
Right.
we lived in Montgomery for
Right.
20 years.
Okay.
And then through my job, we were transferred to Albany, Georgia. We lived there for 18 years.
Wow.
And then when I retired, we moved back to Alabama, and then we moved to Stillwaters, and we
Right.
were there for about 5.5 years, and then we've moved back here to the Auburn-Opelika
Good
area.
old Auburn.
That's right.
That's right. So I come to know your story. That's a story of many now. Your wife is a COVID survivor.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is a story that within the last year and a half, almost 2 years, that we're hearing more and more and more of. But what was particularly interesting to me, or wonderful to me, as I must say, is your love that you described and how y'all came to this place of her healing. And so that's what I want the viewers to hear. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about when did you get COVID, Miss Donna?
The last part of December
Right.
of last year.
And so I asked you before we came on camera, everything was going fine. She was in good health. And how did you know that your wife was in trouble?
Well, when my wife actually has to go to bed,
Yeah.
I know something's wrong. And she did have to do that about 2 days after we had both tested positive for COVID. And she was put on a regimen of medicines for that time, but
Right.
she was worse in 2 days, and so we went back to our doctor in Dadeville, Alabama, and as soon as he just listened to her lungs, and
Right.
immediately he said, "We have to get you in the hospital now." And so we went directly to a room. They hooked her up with the therapeutic called remdesivir,
Right.
and 2 days later from that was on the 7th of January. 2 days later, which was on a Saturday, the doctor called me and he said, we need to move your wife to a bigger hospital with, that has more equipment than we have here, and if we can't, she's gonna die. Well, that's the first time. That was devastating news to me.
Let's talk about that, because I love the fact that you said, my wife has to go to bed. I think most husbands out here watching this show be like, and wives, we move all the time. So you knew that she was tired. What made you go get the test? I heard you say 2 days after the test. What prompted you to even get the test?
Well, our children had called earlier. Well, they'd
Right.
been here for Christmas, and we don't know if that's where we got it
Yeah,
or not.
right.
They didn't really have any symptoms, but my daughter and my daughter-in-law both had gotten tested after
Right.
they left here because they were going to visit the other set of parents.
Right.
And they didn't want to make sure that
Everything was
it was
okay.
okay with them too.
Right.
And so they went to get checked, and they tested positive, and that's when they called us.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And our first test, we went immediately to get tested, was a negative
It was
test.
a negative test. And they call it, I think, a negative positive is what maybe
But-
I'm wrong in that, but I've heard
Well,
of
I
that.
think it was probably a false positive.
Yeah, false positive.
But anyway, I had some symptoms, and the doctor put me on a regimen of medications, but Donna was not experiencing any symptoms, and so he didn't with her. And that's when we went back a few days later, and that was after it was around the first of the year. And
Right.
a lot of people are not working, and she didn't want to go to the emergency room, so we waited until
Imagine.
the 4th of January when the doctor was back in, and we went, and that's when we both tested positive then. And so he put her on the same medication. 2 days later, we
Admitted
went
to the
back, or
hospital.
January the 7th, we went back and put her in the hospital. And then that Saturday is when he called and said that she was really deathly ill and getting worse, and if we couldn't get her moved, to get her some additional help, and they did a good job at the Lake Martin Community Hospital
right.
with what they had. They just didn't have the necessary equipment that she was going to need to hopefully help her. And so,
And you may notice that you said that, and you've said that often, and this is what I said too, that COVID is something new. Like, we don't have the equipment. We're not just sitting back trying to say, okay, if COVID happens. So I get that what you're saying. They gave you what they had. Can I ask you, Miss Donna, what did it make you feel like before you went in the hospital? Because I know you said you don't know much about after that happened, but
Right.
what did you feel like?
I just helpless.
Wow.
And I remember the day that I was put in the hospital.
Right.
I couldn't hold my head up.
Right.
While we were waiting to be seen by the doctor, I actually put my head on the exam table
Right.
and went to sleep.
Wow.
And
It just drew your energy.
it sapped me of every bit of energy that I had.
We're going to talk later on before we end the show about some of the ways you feel now. But I really, really love the part of the story. As a husband, you hear, if we can't get her to another facility, we're doing all we can. She may not make it. As a husband, I know we're men and women of God. I know we trust, and I'll just go ahead and preempt that. I know we know the Lord. I know He's a healer. But I'm sure you probably felt like my husband at the time when they said, well, we need to take her legs. Like, I can't save her. This is my best friend. What did you feel like when you heard those words?
well, of course, it was devastating to me, and I really felt helpless.
Right.
And the only avenue that I had was to call on the one that I knew that could heal her.
Correct.
And so, I was praying this whole time.
Right.
And when the doctor told me that, I called my children, and they both came that day as quickly as they could get here. And we prayed as a family.
Right.
And we have confidence the Lord is going to answer.
He
He doesn't always answer the way we want
That's
sometimes,
right,
but
but
He's
He
going to
hears us.
answer. And but we had faith that He would show mercy and grace on our family, and He did that. But at the time, we didn't know how this was going to come out because we're listening to the doctor too, and he's saying that he's telling us that she's going to die if we can't get her moved. So that was our first concern. Is the Lord expects us to do something too.
Let me stop you right there, because the people need to hear that. He will work the miracle but you have to work the work.
That's
like
correct.
you just said it. You knew God was going to answer your prayer, and He's going to show us grace and mercy. And to me, that means we may not even deserve it, but our God is so awesome to us. He's going to do what He's going to do because of who He is. So you call your kids. You hear your wife is going to die. And I asked you off camera, and I'm going to ask you this again. What does that look like, being without Donna? I know you have your kids and your grandkids, and we love them, but what does that look like?
Well, for me, it's to me, I would just be lost because, you know, we both depend on each other, but I probably depend on her more than she does me.
I think that's every marriage. But so lost is the word. But I love it because I know the story. You went on, you called, you had faith, and God was able to work some things out on your behalf. Now, you were hit with some roadblocks because you try to call these different places, but during COVID time, ain't no extra beds just laying around.
Right.
Am I correct in that?
All the hospitals were full. I know the Lake Martin Community Hospital called over 54 places in the state of Alabama, and I don't know, they may have called some outside the state. And of course, all the hospitals were full, and even if they weren't full, they were not accepting any transfers. So that was the problem we had of we just couldn't get her out. And we tried my kids and I, we called everybody that we could think of that we thought could have some influence. And it was just roadblock after roadblock. And
How long does this process of roadblocks?
that started on a Saturday. We went through all day Saturday and Saturday night doing that. We went through all day Sunday doing that. And finally, late Sunday afternoon, we thought we had a hospital lined up in Cummings, Georgia.
Right.
And the doctors were supposed to get together Monday morning. Well, early Monday morning when we got there, and they did talk, the two doctors talked, that bed had been filled. So we were kind of with no hope. And we left the parking lot at the Dadeville Hospital to just run and get a bite to eat. And on the way back to the hospital, or the
Parking lot.
the parking lot, yeah, my daughter gets a text from her husband's first cousin, who's a nurse practitioner in Flowers Hospital in
Right.
Dothan. And she said they're going to have a bed to come open that afternoon, on Monday afternoon. So I call my doctor with the good news, and then he tells me, well, Bill, don't get me wrong, I'm going to call, but they're not going to accept her because we've already checked Flowers Hospital. They're not taking transfers. And he said, what you're going to have to do is find someone with influence that can call me to get her
Let's
moved.
stop you right there, because the people need to understand, because the people watching this show may think there's a person who has influence. But I've heard this. It was your prayer and your parking lot prayer. God had already worked it out. He was the influence. And the doctor needed to tell you, I've already called. They've already told me no.
That's correct.
You want to talk about choosing to win? You could have heard him and say, okay, guys, if the doctor's already called, what can I do? But you said it before we aired. You know a doctor who's over the doctors. And so
That's right.
we may know some connection somewhere, and God started giving you this little process of remembering. And how did he start steering you?
Well, we pulled over in the First Baptist Dadeville parking lot
Right.
when that occurred, and we were trying to think of anybody that we might know that might have some influence. And my children thought of a pediatrician that they'd grown up with as a child in their childhood that was in Dothan, who was a doctor there,
Right.
but didn't have his phone number. And while they were trying to look up or find his phone number, it was like a lightning bolt hit me in the head, and I mean I could feel the joke.
Right.
And I just blurted out a name, Hayes Latimer, and I said it really loud, and my children thought I was crazy. And they looked at me and they said, well, who is Hayes Latimer? And I said, well, he's a financial advisor in Birmingham, Alabama. And my daughter said, well, Daddy, we don't need a financial advisor, we need a doctor. And so I said, well, I've gotten to know him over the last few years, being on an investment committee with our church, and he was a financial advisor that was handling our account in Birmingham. And I remembered him saying that his father was a pulmonologist in Dothan, Alabama. but he had retired, but the hospital had begged him to come back to work during the COVID because of the shortage of workers. And so I didn't know if he had influence or not. I just begged Hayes. I told him my situation, that my wife was going to die if we couldn't get her moved, and would he mind calling his dad to just check to see if he could help. And
well, let me stop you right here. We're going to finish this story, but every time you say something that I think the listeners need to really hear, he was off work. He got a call to come back and be there at the time that your wife was sick.
That's right.
That's the kind of God we serve. Right. He will bring people out of retirement for you. So you get Hayes, you tell him, pretty much begging him. I'm sure you were distressed at the time. You didn't know how it was going to end. And he was your financial advisor. Like, he wasn't even a doctor. And so you didn't know this guy was going to have any influence, but you were like, hey, I'll try anything at this point. And so what happened there?
Well, he did call his dad, and I called Dr. Ozimba, who was a doctor in Dadeville, and to tell him that about that. And so Hayes called me back in about 10 minutes and said the number I'd given him was not a working number. And so I corrected the number, and within 30 minutes we get confirmation that Donna could be moved to Flowers Hospital in Dothan, Alabama. So what my kids and I and Martin Community Hospital had tried to do in 2.5 days,
God did it.
God did in 30 minutes.
See what I'm saying?
And
but it took you to do some work.
Well, we had to do our part too. He expects us to do our part. But so that afternoon at about 2:55, she was loaded onto an ambulance headed to Dothan, Alabama, to Flowers Hospital. And I got to see her for about 2 minutes as she was being loaded on there. And I just looking at her face, I didn't think I'd ever see her alive again, just the way she looked. But that night, we went back to my home here in Opelika that night to spend the night and go down the next morning because we couldn't get in to see her anyway. And so I get a call about 8 o'clock that night from Dr. Latimer in Dothan. And the first thing out of his mouth was, he said, Mr. Turner, I'm going to just tell you, your wife is a high mortality case. Of course, I already knew that, but it's just, it's a little more final coming from a second doctor that's already telling me that.
But he called to tell you some good news. What was it that he called to tell you?
Well, he didn't at that time. He just said, he asked me how long it had been since I had seen her, and I said, well, I saw her, it's been 4 days, except for the 2 minutes before she got into the ambulance. And he said, well, I'm going to leave orders for you and your children to see her in the morning when you get here. And I didn't realize at the time, but he was thinking it was an end-of-life situation. And
y'all see her, and what happens though? What saved her? What did you find out? Because this is the part I want to make sure we get in. The same day she went to the hospital, what did they have?
Well, she was given an experimental drug. She got there on a late Monday afternoon, and she was given an experimental drug on Wednesday. Now, she was on a BiPAP at 100% oxygen when they hooked her up to try to keep her oxygen level. The next step was a ventilator, and they were trying to keep her off the ventilator if all possible. But they gave her an experimental drug on Wednesday. Overnight, that drug turned her around, and that she was taken off the BiPAP machine. I mean, it was just an overnight deal.
But had you gone to the other hospitals?
Any of the other hospitals that we were trying to get her to, it wouldn't have mattered. Any of the ones in Alabama or even in the Southeast. This was a drug that, as I said, it's experimental. It was very expensive. For one thing, it was over $30,000 a dose, and it was a one-dose treatment. And it was very limited data on it. But Dr. Latimer had convinced the board of directors at Flowers to bring in a small number of doses to just try on critically ill patients. And had we gone anywhere else that we were trying, they would have never had that drug. They didn't have the drug. They didn't really want it because of the cost and the limited data as well. And so the good Lord, in my opinion, that was the second miracle that had happened. The first was getting her moved.
Well, the first was y'all get married. Well, like she said, then getting her moved. So this was
that was a miracle in itself.
That's true. So let me ask you this: but we got the drug, everything's going good, and apparently it worked because she's here.
That's right.
And so what I wanted to ask, two things that you made very clear. that God's timing is everything. What we consider a roadblock is actually a detour
That's
that
right.
God is keeping us from the potholes.
That's
See, this is not the way He needs us to go. He has already orchestrated us. And even though it seems like it's out of sync and out of our way, this is exactly how He wants it. I look over at your wife now, and she looks fantastic, by the way. And I hear you say that you're lost. But we're at the end of COVID. Apparently, hopefully you'll write a book, because there's so much more to this story. But you told me some things when we were off camera about your after effect of COVID. What are some of the things that you're experiencing even after you're home?
Well, and I've heard it from others that have had COVID, you
Right.
have a brain fog.
Right.
You know, I can be talking and all of a sudden that word that needs to come out, it just disappears. And my energy level, most of the time I'm fine.
Right.
But then I may hit a wall and I just have to rest and I have to, and
So it's still
having to
impacting
sit
you.
down
Right.
and not complete what I want to do has been,
And it messes with
Really
you,
hard.
and it messes with your psyche, and it messes with everything. Let me ask you something. God keeping your wife here, what does it mean to you?
Well, humanly speaking, it means everything in the world, because I don't know that I can make it without her. But you know, the good Lord showed us just an abundance of His mercy and grace to keep her here. So He's not through with her yet, and I don't know why He's favored us over not favoring other people. And you know the old Chris Christopherson song of "Why Me, Lord?"
Right.
Well, I think about that a lot, about why me, Lord, because I don't deserve any of this. And other people out there that you
Lost
look at.
mothers, lost wives,
Yeah,
lost...
why not them?
Right. Well, you just said it, because God has works for her. And this show is going to really, really, really help so many people. Yes, COVID is devastating. It's an ugly thing that has shown its face, but God is so great and graceful and merciful and loving, and everything is lined up. What I got from this story is to just be patient. God already got it worked out. Do your part and trust His part. You are just an amazing couple. I'm sure your daughter and your son are glad you're here. I love the way you say that, how much you love your wife. 51 years. And she's still here. You may say you have brain fog, and what he said off camera was that he gets concerned about you when you have a hard time. Aren't you glad that God showed y'all favor?
ooh,
No question about it.
What would you have to say to your children? Why are you glad you're here for your grandbabies? What do you want them to hear that you feel and you're thankful for every day that you're still here?
just, you know, to trust in God.
You can see those little grandbabies. How does it make you feel now to know?
Oh,
that
they
He
were
kept-
just, two of them were just here day before yesterday.
Right.
And it's,
What are the things that you think about you would have missed?
oh, our oldest started college this year.
Right.
He's 18. Today is our oldest granddaughter's 16th birthday.
Right.
And then the two younger ones, I want to be a part of that.
Right. What were you want to say to your husband about how he took care of you through that whole process?
Hey,
Because he kept a journal.
those days, and they didn't let me know any of
Right,
this
right.
until I had been home, what,
Yeah,
a month?
A few weeks.
How does
I
it make
didn't
you feel
know
to
all
know
of
that,
this.
that he went out to God on your behalf like
Wow.
that, sister? We talk about what God put together, let no man equally yoke. How does it feel as a woman? I ain't talking about as a woman of God and all that, but as a woman to know that your husband went to battle for you.
Hey, I depend on him. I'm just honored.
He just did what you knew he'd do, don't you? You knew he'd do it.
He's a pretty good fella.
Wow. Any closing words for the people about what this has done for you as a man of God?
Well, I think anytime you go through adversity, and you know, we've gone through some. This is not the only one, but we've
Right.
gone through adversity before. But anytime you do that, it brings you closer to God, and I think that's part of His plan as well to see how you react. But you know, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 have been two of the most promising verses that I go back to time and time again, particularly in times of difficulty. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding.
Yes.
And in all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path." And so I think as long as you do that, it gives me comfort to know that there's someone there that's in control of things besides me.
Woo, I tell you what a way
And
to
it's in
end.
the valleys that
Come
you
on.
grow.
That's in the valley. What a way to
It's
end
in
this
the
show.
valleys you grow.
I am there. I can tell you right now, I'm trusting God, but He has great things for all of us. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking your time to sit down with little old me. But I appreciate it. I know it's going to heal a lot of hearts. I can't wait for you to call me one day and say, guess what? We wrote the book, or we did the journal, or we did whatever, or the grandkids, whatever. I'm excited to know about how God is going to put a spin on this one, because what a wonderful story. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this couple. I am so honored to have met you. You have really blessed my whole soul. Guys, if you have a story, there's only a few I think will touch this 51 year love like these two lovebirds here. But please go to our website, fnfministries.org, and it says share your story. Choosing to win every day. Remember what I always tell you. To get to a place like this, it is a decision. We have had some hard knocks, but we're going to keep on trusting and keep on trying. Remember what I told you. When you wake up every day and you have a decision, you make sure it's the decision and you choose to win. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Thanks again.
Multiple fractures, what we refer to as segmental fractures, could have led to a brain amputation.